Imagine waking up one morning and realizing she blocked you everywhere. No texts, no Instagram stories, no WhatsApp profile photo, no Snapchat streaks, nothing, just silence. For most men, this feels like emotional whiplash. Your mind instantly starts racing. Did she hate me? Did I lose her forever? Is she testing me? Was there another guy? And that's exactly why blocking hits so hard. It doesn't just remove communication, it removes certainty. Human psychology struggles with unanswered questions, and when a woman blocks you completely, your brain naturally tries to fill in the blanks. But here's what most men misunderstand. A block is not always about hatred. In female psychology, blocking is often emotional self-protection. Women usually act emotionally first and logically second during intense relationship situations. When emotions become overwhelming, many women choose distance instead of confrontation. That means her block could represent several things. She feels hurt. She feels emotionally exhausted. She wants control back. She wants to stop herself from contacting you. She wants your attention, or she genuinely wants closure. The important thing is this: a block is emotional communication without words. And depending on the relationship dynamics, the meaning changes completely. For example, if you constantly chased, begged, or pressured her after arguments, the block may be her way of escaping emotional pressure. But if things ended suddenly and she blocked you immediately after seeing you move on, the block may come from emotional overload, jealousy, or unresolved feelings. Here's another truth most men ignore. Women rarely block men they feel completely indifferent toward. Indifference usually looks like slow replies, dry conversations, or quiet distancing. Blocking is different. Blocking is active, emotional, intentional. That doesn't automatically mean she still loves you, but it does mean you affected her emotionally enough to trigger a reaction. And this is where many men destroy their chances completely. They panic. They create fake accounts. They spam messages. They beg friends to contact her. They write emotional paragraphs trying to fix everything. But female psychology often interprets desperate behavior as emotional weakness and lack of self-control. The moment you lose emotional composure, you confirm her belief that blocking was necessary. Instead, understand this powerful principle. Sometimes the strongest response to being blocked is silence, because silence creates space. Space creates emotional clarity, and clarity reveals the real truth behind her actions. One of the biggest mistakes men make after getting blocked is assuming the woman has completely stopped caring. But in many situations, the opposite is true. In female psychology, blocking can sometimes be an attempt to regain emotional control after feeling vulnerable, ignored, rejected, or emotionally dependent. Think about it carefully. When emotions become too intense, many women don't always communicate directly. Instead, they create distance to protect their pride and emotional stability. For example, if she felt like you were pulling away emotionally, you stopped giving her attention, you seemed less interested, or she feared losing influence over you, blocking can become a psychological way to flip the power dynamic. Suddenly, she controls the situation. Now you're the one wondering, you're the one anxious, you're the one checking your phone. And emotionally, that shift can feel satisfying to someone who previously felt uncertain or emotionally exposed. But here's the deeper truth. Not every block is manipulation. Sometimes it's emotional survival. A woman who feels ignored may block impulsively out of pain. A woman who feels rejected may block out of pride. A woman who still has feelings may block because seeing your name, stories, or online activity keeps reopening emotional wounds. This is why emotions after breakups are rarely logical. One moment she misses you, the next moment she's angry, then curious, then distant again. Emotions move in waves, especially when attachment is involved. Now, here's where male psychology usually works against men. Most men react to blocking as a challenge to their ego. They think, how dare she block me? I'll prove my worth. I'll force her to respond. And that emotional reaction creates chasing behavior. But chasing after being blocked usually strengthens her emotional certainty. Why? Because it confirms she still controls your emotional state. Female psychology is highly sensitive to emotional energy. A man who loses composure under pressure often appears emotionally dependent, while a man who remains calm appears emotionally strong. That doesn't mean becoming cold or toxic. It means respecting the situation enough to step back. Because sometimes the block is temporary emotional intensity, not permanent closure. And ironically, the men who panic the least are often the ones women think about the most afterward. Why? Because emotional self-control creates mystery. When she expects desperation but receives silence instead, her mind starts asking questions. Why isn't he chasing me? Did he move on? Was I wrong about him? And in relationships, unanswered emotional questions are incredibly powerful. There is a point in almost every emotionally intense connection where feelings stop being simple. It becomes too much thinking, too much attachment, too much conflict, too much confusion. And when emotions reach that overload point, blocking can happen as an instinctive escape response. This is important to understand. Sometimes she doesn't block you to punish you. She blocks you to breathe. In female psychology, emotional processing is often deeply internal. Many women don't sit down and logically decide everything during emotional stress. Instead, they react based on what reduces emotional pressure in the moment. If every notification from you triggers anxiety, sadness, anger, or confusion, blocking becomes a fast emotional reset button. It's not always planned, it's often impulsive. For example, after a heated argument that was never resolved, after feeling misunderstood for a long time, after repeated emotional highs and lows, after feeling emotionally drained by constant communication, or after a breakup that still feels unresolved, in those moments, your presence in her digital space can feel like emotional noise, so she removes it, not because you are worthless, but because her nervous system is overloaded. Now, here's where many men misread the situation completely. They assume, she blocked me, so she hates me. But emotional psychology is rarely that clean. A woman can still care and still block you. She can still miss you and still avoid you. She can still feel attached and still choose distance. This is because attachment and emotional regulation don't always move together. Now let's talk about the most dangerous reaction men have here, trying to force contact immediately after being blocked. This usually backfires because it ignores the emotional state behind the block. If she is overwhelmed, your attempts to reconnect don't feel romantic or reassuring. They feel like pressure. And pressure is exactly what she is trying to escape. In this state, even a simple message through another account can trigger the same emotional reaction again. I need space. So she blocks again, or becomes even more distant emotionally. But there is another layer most men miss. Overwhelm is temporary in many cases. Emotions settle, clarity returns, distance reduces intensity. And when that happens, curiosity often replaces stress. She may start thinking, what actually happened between us? Why did I react like that? Did I act too fast? But this only happens when the emotional environment stays calm, not when it's constantly disturbed by chasing behavior. That's why understanding timing is more important than emotion here, because in relationships, space doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes space is what transforms emotional chaos into emotional clarity. Not every block is emotional confusion or impulsive reaction. Sometimes it is a clear boundary. And this is where many men struggle the most, because it removes hope from the equation. In female psychology, when a woman feels that her emotional safety, respect, or boundaries have been repeatedly violated, blocking becomes a protective decision rather than an emotional reaction. This is not about mood, it's about self-preservation. For example, blocking can become final when she felt disrespected repeatedly, trust was broken too many times. Arguments became toxic or manipulative. She felt emotionally unsafe in communication, or she has already emotionally detached before blocking. In these cases, the block is not meant to create confusion. It is meant to end access. This is an important distinction. Temporary emotional blocks often carry internal conflict. Final boundary blocks carry emotional resolution. Even if she still has memories, even if she still feels something, she has decided that contact is no longer healthy for her emotional state. And once a woman reaches that point, chasing her usually confirms her decision rather than reversing it. Because from her perspective, the block is no longer a question, it is a conclusion. Now, here's the hard truth many men resist. You cannot prove your way out of a boundary block. No amount of texting, no apology paragraph, no emotional explanation, no one last chance message. When a woman has emotionally detached and set a boundary, she is no longer evaluating your intentions, she is protecting her peace. But here's where emotional maturity becomes powerful. Instead of asking, how do I get her back? The healthier question becomes, what did this situation reveal about how we both handle emotional pressure? Because a final block often says more about the relationship dynamic than about one single moment. It shows where communication broke down. It shows where emotional needs weren't aligned. It shows where respect or understanding may have been lost over time. And while that realization can be painful, it is also where real growth starts. Because the goal is not to chase someone who has closed the door. The goal is to understand why the door closed in the first place and how to avoid repeating the same emotional patterns in future relationships. In many cases, men who accept a boundary block calmly become stronger emotionally afterward, not because they won her back, but because they learned emotional self-control, acceptance, and clarity. And in relationships, those traits matter far more than desperate attempts to reopen something that has already ended. After all the confusion, overthinking, and emotional noise, there is a final truth that most men don't want to accept, but need to hear clearly. Being blocked everywhere is not just about her. It is also about the state of the relationship at its breaking point. Because in real emotional dynamics, blocking is never random. It is the final expression of how she feels she needs to handle the connection, whether that feeling is pain, overwhelm, anger, or complete closure. Now, here's where female psychology becomes important to understand in a grounded way. Women don't usually block without emotional buildup. Even impulsive blocks often come after repeated internal pressure, thoughts, feelings, misunderstandings, or emotional fatigue that was never fully expressed. But once the block happens, the conversation shifts. It is no longer about persuasion. It is no longer about explanations. It is no longer about proving love or loyalty. It becomes about acceptance. And acceptance is what most men resist the most. Instead, they enter a cycle. I just need one chance to explain. If she understood me, she would unblock me. I can fix this if I reach her somehow. But emotional reality doesn't work like a negotiation table, because at the moment she blocked you everywhere, she made a psychological decision. She needed distance more than dialogue. Now, this doesn't automatically mean she will never come back, but it does mean you cannot force reconnection through pressure. In many cases, the only thing that ever reopens emotional space is time combined with emotional change, not repeated pursuit. And here's the part that actually helps you grow. A block forces reflection. It forces you to see patterns you may have ignored. How you handled conflict, how you responded to emotional tension, whether communication was balanced or one-sided, whether attachment turned into dependency. These are uncomfortable questions, but they are the ones that build emotional maturity. Because the strongest outcome after being blocked is not getting her back, it's becoming someone who handles relationships with more awareness, stability, and emotional control. Sometimes people return, sometimes they don't. But either way, the real power is not in breaking the block, it's in breaking the pattern that led to it. And when you understand that, the situation stops being just rejection and becomes a lesson in emotional growth, self-respect, and clarity for every relationship that comes after.